Hey there, y'all. Welcome back. So this one, there was only one case in the blue laws section, so I'm kind of going to smush 2F and 2G together and just call them F, okay? Excuse me. So there's one case under the blue laws, and the next section actually touches on blue laws too, but it's McGowan v. Maryland in 1961, and the vote was 8-1, affirmation of the lower court ruling. And Chief Justice Warren delivers the majority opinion. And blue laws basically are laws that say that businesses have to shutter on Sundays. Um, Basically, God's day of rest, at least historically and from a European perspective, right? And the Justice Warren lays out basically three legal approaches that this case can take. The first is equal protection. The second is a due process violation due to the sort of vagueness of the law. And the third is the Establishment Clause. And basically, what happened here is McGowan sued Maryland, saying that if you close down my store on Sundays, it's a violation of my free will to practice commerce. Um, but they didn't mention their sort of religion or any Establishment Clause case. And so, first, the court basically says they don't have standing for the Establishment Clause argument. So they're going to basically, we're not even going to touch that argument. And then they rule that despite having sort of historical grounding in religion, right? God's day of rest, basically from the Bible. Maryland does have the right to set a day of rest without commercial activity. Um, they say it sort of takes on also a secular tone, and so Maryland can do that. Okay, Unit 2G is the free exercise clause. What is valid secular policy? So the first case is Reynolds v. the U.S. This is a really famous case about polygamy. It was decided in 1879. So this guy Reynolds was married and living in a U.S. territory. It wasn't actually a state yet. And so, because it's 1879 at this point, right? Manifest destiny. We're moving westward. Reynolds is a Mormon and is married, and then knowingly breaks the law, a federal law saying that you cannot practice polygamy in the territories or in the federal states. Polygamy is illegal and jailable, and yet Reynolds takes on a second wife and is arrested for it. And the lower court says, the federal government absolutely has a right to arrest him for that. Reynolds appeals and uses a free exercise clause argument. And basically says that the Book of Mormon makes it a duty for men to take on extra wives if they can. And the court sort of castigates Reynolds, right? They say that polygamy, first of all, has no history in Western or European culture and is mainly sort of an African, tribal, and Middle Eastern Islamic culture, right? And then they say that polygamy is sort of a recent addition to the United States culture, particularly, and is specifically and idiosyncratically a Mormon thing. And then they declare basically not only is marriage a religious ceremony, but it's also regulated by states, right? It's regulated by government, and they do have a right to regulate what the rules of marriage are because it's a civil union. And you have to have licensure, and you have to, get paperwork and blah, blah, blah. So that, it is the government's sort of prerogative to make laws about marriage. And not only does the federal government have the power to regulate this in the states, but also in the territory. They say that's sort of a silly argument. And then they go on and say, while government cannot intrude upon religious belief or religious opinion, it can intrude upon religious actions and practices, right? And they sort of they break it down into reductio ad absurdum, right, which is sort of um, a logical technique and an argumentative technique where you take the argument to its most extreme form, to make it absurd, right? It's called reductio ad absurdum. And they say, what if your religious tenets told you to practice human sacrifice or for women to throw themselves upon the funeral pyre? Are you telling me that the government doesn't have a right to regulate that? Bullshit, basically, is their answer. And they basically declare Reynolds' second marriage is completely invalidated, and he can be and will be jailed for knowingly breaking the law. Okay, case two, Cantwell v. Connecticut. This is a unanimous 9-0 reversal of the lower court ruling, and Justice Roberts delivers the opinion, which is unanimous. So basically, here, I think it was Connecticut. Yeah, Connecticut and his sons are Jehovah's Witnesses. And Cantwell asks some people in the street in this town in Connecticut, I think it's New Haven or something, if he can play them a record and talk to them about his religion. And these guys turned out to be Catholics. And he played on his record player, because it's really old school, right? It's 1940. He played this sort of anti-Catholic screed, um, and was trying to, get them to listen to him about his beliefs in Jehovah's Witness. And they were sort of pissed off, and they were like, get the fuck out of here, or we're going to beat you up. And he left. He was completely like kind and respectful, and he immediately put up his stuff and he left. Well, later he was charged with sort of breach of peace, with causing others to breach the peace, right? And he was arrested, and the lower courts basically ruled that Connecticut could do that. But the Supreme Court says no. Connecticut violated the what is their name? The McGowan, no, the Cantwells. Excuse me. Um, Connecticut can't arrest the Cantwells, right? They violated their due process rights under the First Amendment, not only to practice their religion but also the practice of free speech and association. And Connecticut argues that basically the appellants could have gotten a permit from this like complicated permitting office where the officer of the permitting office decides whether your sort of paperwork is legitimate and your organization is actually religious. And so the courts are like, no, we're not doing this. They say first, and this is, I'm going to give you a long sort of quote in a minute. I'm sorry for that, but it's a good one. I really liked the writing style of this one. Um, First, they say a statute authorizing previous restraint upon the exercise of the guaranteed freedom by judicial decision after trial is as obnoxious to the Constitution as one providing for like restraint by administrative action. So, not only is sort of the administrative office not up to par, but also like allowing people to go to the court to appeal their decision after, it's way too prohibitive and sort of like a prior restraint, right? When we talked about like New York Times 1971 case where the government was forcing them to hold their Vietnam information, right? And the court said, no, we're not having prior restraint, and we don't want the courts holding these things up next time. Because that's obnoxious to the First Amendment, and they're saying the same thing here. Um, and then second, they say to condition the solicitation of aid for the perpetuation of religious views, or systems upon some license, the grant of which rests in the exercise of a determination by some state authority as to what is a religious cause and what isn't, is to lay a forbidden burden upon the exercise of liberty protected by the Constitution. So, we're not having this administrative state set up to decide what is religious and what isn't, and what is legitimate and what isn't. That's not their role. And then finally, they say, Cantwell did not incite disorderly conduct and he must be released immediately. He was respectful and just asked that people listen to his opinions. And then they say, quote, however misguided others may think him. And then the really long one just kind of lays out the whole argument right here. In the realm of religious faith and that of political belief, sharp differences arise. In both fields, the tenets of one man may seem the rankest error to his neighbor. Like, your opinions might be like the craziest thing I've ever heard of, and I think it's disgusting. To persuade others to his own point of view, the pleader, as we know at times, resorts to exaggeration, to vilification of men who have been or are prominent in church or state, and even to false statements, straight up lying. But the people in this nation have ordained in the light of history that in spite of the probability of excesses and abuses, these liberties are, in the long view, essential to the enlightened opinion and right conduct on the part of the citizens of a democracy. Nowhere is this shield more necessary than in our own country for a people composed of so many races and so many creeds. Thought it was a really cool philosophical founding. All right, and then the final case is Braunfeld v. Brown in 1961. This is a 6-3 reversal of the lower court opinion, and Justice Warren provides a plurality opinion. So it's just 4, and then there are some who are like, yes, but I concur. I don't exactly want to sign on your opinion. So Pennsylvania passes their own blue law banning commerce on Sundays, and this Jewish furniture store owner sues under the free exercise clause. And he's like, look, I'm Jewish. I have to close on Saturdays because of my belief. Now you're also making me close on Sundays because of this law. I should be able to open my store on Sundays and exercise my own sort of blue day. But the courts disagree, and they say because the burden is only indirect and is not sort of particularly aimed at harming Jewish people and Jewish businesses, that the state has a right to continue to implement its laws. And Justice Brennan puts in a tiny dissent. He's like, man, I disagree. I agree with a lot of this, but I do think this is a violation of their rights. All right, so that's it for this section. I'll see you for the next one. Thanks so much. Bye.